Oh,
Oh.
There's
a lot of viruses.
Oh.
she's in, Las
Dorothy,
Cruces,
do
New
you want to see
Mexico.
if I can move?
Oh.
I hope she shows up on
Yeah,
Saturday.
but she's she's
Okay.
at Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
there's
We're
gonna
starting?
be another person.
Oh, okay.
I just don't know if she.
Great. Okay, let's call our meeting to order and start with our roll call. I'm Mike Kikuchi, I'm committee chair.
Will Beagle, member?
Sheila Amder, member.
Martina Morgan, member.
Avery Lenhart, guest.
Paul Stern, Vice Chairman.
Susan Hunter, guest.
Debbie Pilato, member.
Gina DeVivo Brassall, member. Jennifer Kaufman, Director of Planning and Development and staff, along with Dorothy Delavalle. So Devalle.
She's renaming you.
And Brisa
Teresa Byford, guest.
Yeah, and that's the Mary.
and Mary P, member of the public. Good. Thank you, everyone. Let's start with review and approval of the minutes. If we're-
I move them. I read them every day.
Me
It's
too.
just a tiny typo, correction,
Typo,
your correction,
okay,
okay, under for new business 4A1, just, I think it it was meant to read, guest speakers provide the committee with a timeline
I didn't catch that.
to expand,
Because they didn't outline.
a little tiny thing.
I don't know what kind of line it was, actually.
Well,
Could
okay,
it just be a
meaning a line.
discussion?
Well, that was gonna be a plan.
Did
Okay,
they pass
No, I
something?
thought it was an out.
No, they didn't.
An outline?
Bit of both, I
Oh.
think.
Okay, an outline.
Do we have that?
The notion being that
Not in.
they were gonna come in with a sort of the big
No.
picture for us.
They
so
just
were gonna-
discussed it.
Okay.
That's why I'm like.
How about a
discussion.
concept?
Concept.
Concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that, yeah.
To expand.
So you want
to change
the concept? Is that what the consensus is?
Yes.
Yes, great.
No, I need
Anything else?
correction.
You have a second?
Oh, I second.
Thank you. All in favor?
I abstain because I wasn't here.
A second here, man.
Not
Not tonight. Be tired.
I'll be here all night.
I want the record to show I was on time.
Yes, you were.
You are, Earl.
Yes, you were.
Yeah, I was, with a coffee.
Great, okay. Next item is opportunity for public comment. Mary, did you want to make public comment? Can you hear us, Mary?
Your hands
I
are-
can hear you. I don't have any comments. I just wanted to watch and listen.
Excellent, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Yep. Maybe we should get your full name, Mary?
Sure, sorry. I'm trying to leave my work and get in my car. My name is Marion Paul and I live on Cedar Swamp Road. 87 Cedar Swamp Road.
Great. Thank you for joining us.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
let's jump to new business. We're gonna lead off with Risa.
Yeah, so I'll just give
Intro.
a little intro. Risa Byford is, works with Civic Brandon, who is the town's consultant on our facilities master plan. So a couple of years ago now, we, did sort of a conditions assessment of, several of our town facilities, including the elementary schools, our senior center, and a few other places, the public works garage, our emergency management facilities. And now what we're doing is we're doing a community, we're sort of figuring out, we know the conditions, we know where they are, but now what is it that the town values? What do we want to do? And where do we want to prioritize our resources, right? So I'm going to let Brisa kind of take it from there, but basically that's the gist of it, right? Brisa, is that how I'll let you give your elevator speech, which is probably a little bit more articulate than mine.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you. I appreciate that, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. My name is Brisa Byford. Thanks for letting me join your meeting for a bit today. If I share my screen, would y'all be able to see that okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I do have some slides to kind of talk.
But we have
We
to,
have to make her.
we have to make you a co-host, I
Co-host.
think. You wanna do it?
Sheila? Sheila, do you mind?
I don't,
The,
the, use the mouse? Yeah, I know. Oh, yes, it's okay, yeah. I actually run Zooms, you never know it. It's under share screen.
Another, yeah, she can just share her.
Okay. Do I have to make her a host or she?
No, she should be able to share her screen.
Okay, do you want to put it up, Teresa?
Okay, it still says it's disabled for me.
Okay.
Oh, share, okay, I have to say share, okay.
I think
you
go to
Uh,
her-
you
no.
sharing.
I think you go to Brisa,
Yeah, you go to,
yeah.
go to what?
If you go to the three, if you hover over where Brisa is, and see those three dots,
Okay.
I think you can say.
Make
co-host.
Yep.
Make co-host, okay.
And then you might want to stop sharing.
Yeah. Get back out of that.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go, Sheila.
All right.
Y'all can see my screen okay now,
Takes a
right?
village,
Yeah.
takes a village to share.
We got it.
People can still do tech.
That's right.
That's good steps.
Hey, well, you be careful while you talk there.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so yeah, we've already had a pretty good setup. Thanks, Jennifer. What we are doing is kind of what we've been calling phase 2. So phase 1 was that kind of existing conditions report. And this phase 2 is all about community engagement to really figure out what is the community value and therefore what types of investments in facilities would the community support. And so some of I guess maybe one thing I want to clear up right away in case there is any confusion, because some of the conversations we've had have been a little confused on what we are doing exactly. So what it is, like I said, it's community engagement to really define what are those values and then be able to give the town a tool or a system to be able to make decisions on facilities based on those values that are in line with those values that, you know, further promote those values. What it's not, we're not deciding on any one project. So it's not like at the end of this, we're going to say, yes, you're going to do this, you know, huge multi-million-dollar something, right? That's not really our role. It's really just what would the community support? That's kind of our broad guiding question. So that existing conditions report, in case you aren't familiar with it, there is a project website, mansfieldtomorrow.org, mansfieldtomorrow.org. There's kind of the 3 Mansfield Tomorrow projects that are going on, but if you click into that facilities project, there's a documents page that will let you actually look at this full like 70-80 page document, which goes through all of those, you know, the facilities they looked at. Here's the existing conditions, what the plumbing's like, what the lighting's like, all that kind of stuff. And it did surface just some kind of, here's some ideas for what could happen, but nothing was ever set in stone. It was merely kind of to get the ball rolling, to get the conversation started. And so we've kind of referenced those in some of our work, but have never been using them as like, these are the only options, this, you know, vote, basically. We haven't done that to ask to, or during our community engagement. And so what we're trying to do, instead of explicitly trying to, like, if you think of, you know, master plan kind of in the traditional sense, you think of like a master plan neighborhood, right? Where like every brick is, you know, meticulously thought out and what colors your house could be, what color your house could not be, all of those details. We're not trying to get to that level because frankly, we don't think that's useful. Like a master plan like that is really only useful the second it's done and then very quickly it becomes out of date, right? And so what we've taken the approach of is how can we build this decision-making framework that will last the town for, you know, hopefully a very long time, decades to come. And so what the decision-making framework that we're building, it kind of has 3 things. What we want to do is, yeah, look at those individual facilities. So what are the conditions that those facilities are in? And we've developed a grading system that I'll show you here in a minute to make it really easy to understand for the public. Because, you know, I don't have an engineering background. Much of the public doesn't have an engineering background. So you can look at that existing conditions report, but it might be a lot of gibberish to some people purely because, you know, I don't know what certain types of lighting means and all that kind of stuff. So we're simplifying, making this grading system to basically say, oh, this facility is in good condition, this facility is in poor condition, that kind of thing. But we also want to be able to look at projects that involve multiple facilities, because a lot of things that could happen, like they don't just happen in a silo, right? A lot of things could kind of have a lot of different pieces. So just for random example, you know, if something were to be built, let's say, just as an example, let's say the senior center moves to where Vinton currently is, and then something else goes into where the senior center currently is. And so it's a lot of moving parts. You can't just look at like one site on its own. You kind of have to consider the context of kind of the knock-off effects of potential investments. But then ultimately, like I said, want to measure those against the community values. So in examining the individual facilities, I mentioned we developed this scoring system. So we've got these 12 criteria. We initially developed this with the town as well as the firm who did that phase 1 existing conditions report, TSKP Studio, to develop these 12 criteria that made sense, you know, that we actually could grade on, you know, that either the town and their staff has the necessary kind of background information and context to make a grade on these, or an outside firm like TSKP could also help. And we vetted these with the public at our first kind of public town hall event that I think was July of last year. And so things kind of, we had our initial list to go in, we vetted them with the public, and they slightly changed to give us these 12 finalized criteria. And so this is one piece of that system. So we can look at any facility, grade it on, you know, how much deferred maintenance does it have right now? How adaptable is the site? So the lot itself, what other projects could go there? You know, how's the current building performing? Does the building or the land or just the area have historical significance? So looking at all of these different things to basically give a, oh yeah, this facility is currently average, or this facility is currently below average, above average, to kind of make it really easy to understand. So that's one piece of what we've done. The next piece, to be able to look at those, you know, projects that involve multiple facilities, those kind of broader scenarios, and then also to measure against community values. So we have done a lot, like most of our project and our work has focused on these community values, right? What are they, so that we can develop that scoring system? And we first started by taking a look at the most recent plan of conservation and development and pulling out the values that were already evident in that. And then we built off of that, kind of use that as our starting point list. And we did a community survey to validate, vet, see what changes or additions needed to be made, as well as we've done a ton of engagement, both virtually and in person. So we've done a lot of focus groups, a lot of interviews. And then a month or so ago, I guess maybe it's closer to 2 months at this point, but we did a handful of pop-ups at different spots around town, really trying to see like what does the community value? And ultimately, you can see just some of the photos there. I was mentioning all the different things we've done and conversations we've had. Like I said, we also have done a lot virtually too, so obviously don't have photos of those, but ultimately have come up with this list. And this is, I guess, 9 community values that seem to be from all of the engagement, you know, whether it was virtual, whether it was those pop-ups, whether it was our very first town hall. These seem to be the 9 that resonate the most with community members. And we're still exploring. I guess I'll pull the curtain back a little bit. That left column, those were the top 4. And so hopefully, I think maybe you'll be happy to see that affordable housing is one of those kind of components there. But that left side was the top 4. The right side were kind of the next 5. We're still exploring in our report on whether or not we treat them all equally, or we do give that left kind of top 4 side a little bit more credence. So we don't know exactly yet, but this is what came out of all of that engagement. So it's quality public schools and educational opportunities, public safety, protection of open spaces and the natural environment, and then a catch-all kind of housing in general, but family housing, workforce housing, affordable housing. Really focus on basically not student housing, right? Not housing that, you know, could be rented to students, not things like that, really housing for, permanent community members, so to speak. Infrastructure, so roads, sewage, that kind of thing. Senior services and resources, we've had a lot of conversations around that. And then there's been quite a bit of overlap between our project and the Parks Plan and the Senior Center, and kind of how those all shape together. Renewable energy and sustainability, protection of working farms and local agriculture, and then walkability and bikeability. So these are basically what we're building that scoring system on. And the idea is that these are just, examples, ABC, kind of generic values here. But if you would place those values on a matrix like this, and you could look at a scenario of, this facility moving here, another facility coming in this space, opening up room for another thing here, or opening up land for housing, whatever it might be. You can look at those scenarios and see like, how well are they aligned with those values? If those are the 9 things that the community says they value the most, how do these projects or these things that we're looking at when it comes to facilities align with those values? And our hope is too that it also is helpful beyond just facilities. Obviously, that's the scope of our project, but we've tried to develop this in kind of a future-proof way so that the town could make more than just facilities decisions using this same kind of framework, because it's all about what the community values, right? But then you can see like scenario C, for example, is the best in this kind of generic example, right? That project best aligns with what the community says they value. And so maybe that's the project you'd go with. Or another way to look at it is kind of a yes and approach. So maybe scenario B, for example, like what could be done to extend its alignment with values D, C, and B, right? Like what changes should be made, what things should be added, so that it does speak to those values more. So that's ultimately what we are trying to do. So we've got the values, kind of know where that is, and we're building how does that scoring system work, and we'll start to run some test scenarios through it so that we can see kind of where things shape up, where things spit out, and kind of know kind of where to go from there. So I guess I'll pause there because I do have a couple questions for y'all, but I know I just threw a lot at you about kind of the project and our process. So I'll pause there and see if you have any questions for me at this point.
What are the, Bridget, I don't understand this.
Pictograms.
Yeah, I don't understand it. So is this the values you're referring to in the previous page, what were priorities for people?
Right. Yeah. So
affordable housing would be D, I assume.
Right. Yeah. This is obviously just a generic illustration because we did this before we had the values set.
All right. Okay.
But yeah, the idea is that A is quality public schools and educational opportunities. B is public safety, right? And it's going to be more than just these 5 here. But basically that way we can look at like how well does maybe a project is really strong when it comes to education, but it's really lacking when it comes to walkability or something like that. You can see where the holes are basically. To help the town either prioritize something else or make changes to better meet that specific value.
Okay.
And I think one of the reasons why we're focusing so much on this is that there's a lot of money available for grant money. So we know that we have these needs. So how are we going to prioritize what we spend what a grant we apply for? So I think that's one of the action items that will come out of this is, what kind of grant do we write to improve our facilities?
So Justin, maybe you're going to answer this in the next one, but the other question, so when you have those sort of 3 areas of different kinds of housing grouped together, and then senior services separate, the reality is we have found, and one of the highest priorities the town has and the council's adopted is for senior housing. I'm not using the right word. What's the right word?
It's okay.
Okay.
Age restricted.
Age restricted housing. And so this for this committee, and I know some of us were one of the meetings, that was a big thing that so affordable housing is a very broad term, but there's very specific populations for whom the need is the highest.
Right.
Including homeless.
Right. Yeah, there are a lot of these that do kind of overlap and intersect, right? And that is a good example of them. So what we're doing to build that scoring system is instead of just purely, okay, score quality public schools, like how well does this project meet that value? Instead of just that, and it's one score per one value, we're developing a set of questions beneath kind of each of these values. So 3 or 4 questions. So that way we can look at a few different kind of elements of that value, right? And so it's not just kind of one and done. With those 3 to 4 questions, we can get into a little bit more of those specifics. So with the family housing, workforce housing, and affordable housing one question can be more maybe about the family housing piece. One question can be more about the workforce housing piece, again, overlap. One question can be more about just kind of affordable housing in general. On the senior side, services side, there's like housing, but also just general resources, programs, things like that, and how well kind of included or represented does that demographic group kind of be involved in that particular project. And so the hope is that by having several kind of criteria under these criteria, I guess, so to speak, we can get into a little bit more of those details. And so you can see, well, maybe on 2 of those 3 questions we're really strong, but on like 1, it's weak. So what could be done within that specific like vein of just that one value to help with those kind of details and the crossover there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, the results of your scoring are going to be based on the values that you spelled out earlier, right?
Right. Yeah.
But
And-
does the plan of conservation and development get into the granular stuff about what kind of workforce versus affordable versus senior housing? Does it address that at that granular level?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I think on some of these it might, because for example, protection of working farms and local agriculture, that was one that was pulled like straight from the POCD from like 2016. Whereas family housing, workforce housing, and affordable housing kind of evolved over time through our conversations. And so in some it might have more detail, but in others it might not. But I also know that's kind of due to be updated fairly soon as well. And so we're kind of coming a little bit.
Housing
I was gonna
priorities
offer
the town
that our committee has
council adopted.
its own criteria,
Yeah.
its own set of
I don't know
values
whether they've
that,
even seen them.
that might be useful to you in
Well, and the town council
yeah,
adopted the
they
priorities
those, yeah.
recommended by this committee as to what are the priorities for affordable housing in our community.
And
especially
also, and that was directed really towards the use of the
Housing Trust Fund.
$5 million that we have in our housing.
Yeah. But they still would apply to just about anything, wouldn't they?
Sure.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay,
No, that's a good point. We'll definitely take a look at those and use it to shape those questions that are underneath that one. So that they are in line with what you've, already developed and council has already adopted.
great.
And of course, the scoring at the end of the day is still going to be somewhat subjective, right? Like this isn't an exact science, right? This is still at the end of the day going to be down to kind of opinion on basically how strongly something meets a value. So it doesn't fully take that subjectiveness away, but hopefully it does make it a little bit more data driven. Versus just kind of deciding on a project. There's these set things that the town will be able to back up their investments with. So a couple questions for you is, this first one is kind of broad because I kind of want to see maybe where you take it. We can dive in a little bit further, but how do you see affordable housing decisions influencing facilities planning? Because, on the surface, I guess they are kind of 2 different things, like town facilities versus affordable housing. I think a lot of people would think of those kind of in totally separate buckets. So maybe where do you see the overlap? How do you see what we're doing playing a role in what you're doing and vice versa?
Well, again, I think, I don't think you've seen, I don't, Brisa, I don't think you've seen what this committee has adopted in terms of the use of looking at both town facilities as well as Yukon facilities and town land and so on in relationship to affordable housing. So we already have a framework for what, how decision-making should go around that, which I
Right.
guess Jennifer can get to you.
I'll
Yeah.
get it right now.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll definitely want to make sure that we're very in line with what you've already done.
To the extent that our committee has any influence over the use of town resources. I mean, we're trying to work with outside agencies and developers and nonprofits and what have you, but the town also has land. And that's something that's in short supply for the purposes of creating affordable housing. So I think this plan that, I don't know if you can see, this is a couple of excerpts from the study that TSK did. There are some ideas in there that talk about affordable housing on various pieces of land, and the one question would be whether there's enough interest in the community to move forward and try to apply that land to an affordable housing application.
Right. Yeah, because it's definitely one of the things that is, there is more like nuance to is the community can say they value that, but they at the same time could say, but I don't want the town government handling that, right? That's a value, but that.
Yeah, we don't want to be in the housing business, I don't think.
Right. Right. What else comes to mind with just how these kind of, what you've already done and how this project overlaps? Or things you want to just make sure that we know and consider?
well, maybe you want to take a look at what we've, as I said, I'm just thinking time-wise, but take a look at what we've already developed that Jennifer is going to send you,
Absolutely.
rather than us just reiterate it. I don't have it in front of me.
Sure.
All
Okay.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
we will absolutely do that and make sure it's in line with everything that you've already done. I guess this is more of a brainstorming question.
See me.
But when we think about the scenarios that we're going to be looking at, so those are the things that involve kind of multiple facilities, multiple locations, right? Is there anything maybe you've already talked about as a group, or maybe just ideas you have of like, oh, what if we put this there and then that made room for housing here or whatever, are there any of those just kind of ideas, whether you've already talked about them or you're just thinking about them now? Do you think it would be helpful for us to run through the system and score?
Is that what you mean? Like,
Well,
like
yeah.
the use of Vinton as, you know,
Lots, yeah,
Yeah,
and
like
Goodwin
there-
was talked about for
Vinton,
senior
like the
housing.
two schools that are currently not being used, like
Mhm.
repurposing them for affordable housing. I actually, in my head, think that also,
That's in the plan.
yeah, because it actually hits two goals, right? Like if we're looking at conservation and
Right.
protection of land,
Use,
right, we're ensuring that land that's already developed,
Right.
further used.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
that it can sit on where there's already public water, right, and electricity or infrastructure.
There is
that's a better
no
word.
public water and sewer.
Yeah.
Oh, there is not, and not at Goodwin.
There is a good
Good,
one.
yeah.
water,
Actually, no, they're on well and septic, so
Right.
they have to be,
Both of
Uh,
them are?
yep.
That's so interesting.
So southeast,
Oh, the new school?
yeah, southeast and
Oh
Minnesota.
my God.
I wonder if infrastructure and the creation of infrastructure ought to be
Yeah.
a subject, ought to be a value, or, how important is it to the town that we have adequate,
Yes,
arteries and veins for growing as opposed to.
yes.
yeah, the use of a lot of the facilities and land is really going to relate to, can we support water and
Well,
sewer?
and that's the biggest impediment to growth in this
And
town.
then there are engineered systems that can be used, no,
Yeah.
how much we've looked into those.
Of course, there's a question about whether anybody in town wants growth, or whether everyone, the majority of the town wants growth.
They want affordable housing,
Yeah.
So it's, it's a fair issue.
strong support for
We're
affordable
a nice
housing.
little small town.
It seems like, I mean, anecdotally from our conversations, it seems like maybe the growth people are against is university growth as opposed to kind of townwide, in general growth. So maybe the right kind of growth that aligns with, as opposed to just growth for growth's sake. Now, obviously, that's a little bit, outside of your control to a certain extent. But I mean, that's just anecdotally from kind of what we heard of what people seem to be, the biggest frustrations that people seem to be having.
This committee has talked a lot about using, identifying existing town facilities or
Yes.
land. However, in your priorities, you do not call that out. You talk about rehabilitation, conversion, or redevelopment of existing properties, especially multifamily, into affordable housing. You talk, so the housing targeted towards households with income at or below 50% AMI. Housing targeted at people experiencing homelessness or those at risk of homelessness, age-restricted housing for people 55 or older, housing units designed for families with children, housing designed for persons with disabilities, applications that leverage other funding sources, and then the seventh is rehabilitation, conversion, or redevelopment of existing properties.
Yeah.
So you're not talking specifically about the town, but I mean,
But we had a strong recommendation to the council that related to the reuse of existing town facilities, town land, and also the council working with the university to identify university land.
Yeah, that's the other thing is.
Because we were
Where to
focusing
look.
more on population and then we added that.
There's a lot of university land around town that we,
We want.
we want. Basically, yeah.
We want them to give
We
it.
want the university to give it to the town, or give it to the appropriate use.
Right.
We don't want to run housing projects, but it would be nice if the university freed up some spaces around
Well, maybe not the university, but also the state.
the state, or the state,
Right.
the university, you
Yeah,
know.
because then like.
And in my case, I mean, I specifically got my eyes on the,
So I think that's the presentation that was made to the town council, right? Where we made recommendations.
Yes,
Right.
Yes.
yes.
So we can send that to
Yeah.
Rita also.
Yeah. That would be very helpful.
Good. Risa, do you have other questions for us?
No, I do not. That was all. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I guess quickly, I'll just talk about kind of what our next steps are. So we're going to finalize that scoring system and kind of how it all works so that, you know, it does make those histograms, use those sample scenarios to test the framework, make sure that everything, you know, works as expected and see kind of where things shake out. And then we'll finalize that report and framework. But there'll be a lot more kind of at that stage going back to the public and making sure that, hey, this is all aligns with what you told us. This sounds, you know, like the right approach. And then I mentioned this, but just in case you know, want to see it on screen or you didn't know about it. So it's manfieldtomorrow.org. You can always go and kind of check back for updates. So that's me. So I guess unless you guys have any other questions for me, that's all I've got.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.
Right.
thank you.
Good. Anything else on that? So Jennifer's forwarding the relevant documents. But I think we have to concern ourselves with ongoing input to Lisa. To make sure we're clear on things with her. Good. Okay, let's move on. So we're really happy to have Avery and Susan here tonight. So I'm going to first turn the floor over to Avery. And I don't think Avery needs a lot of introduction in this
In
community.
case you don't know who I am, I'm the director of the Wyndham Region No Freeze Project. I've been with the No Freeze every day. It's a different number. I can never really remember. It's 11 or 12 years. I've been the executive director since 2019. And the No Freeze is we are an adults only shelter. And we are very involved in the statewide homeless response system. So we do quite a bit of work with housing and diversion, which is a form of prevention, homeless prevention, and that kind of thing. So that's a lot of the work that we do. I didn't really present or prepare any presentation because I thought this might be just a good discussion. I also just want to say that I'm more than welcome to more than happy to share my space of time here with Susan. Susan is on our board for the No Freeze, but she's also the ED for WAME, and as you know, and and she and I have worked very closely together on a lot of things. So, so I don't want to feel like I'm the only one on the floor right now.
Could you just tell people, perhaps Avery or Susan, there is this housing response system people call 211. You're looking at, you know, you have priorities about who you try to get housed.
Yeah.
And could you just talk about that, talk about the
Sure.
difficulties with that, and talk about maybe who's the most difficult to house? And can you ever house anybody in Mansfield is a question.
Yeah.
But the-
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so this,
Where the
that's
housing is.
wonderful. Thank you. So the state, a number of years ago, decided to create a homeless response system and address homelessness head on, with guidance from HUD. And so what they did was they created what's called a CAN system. The state is divided geographically into 7 coordinated access networks. So we are part of the Eastern CAN, which is essentially the entire eastern half of the state, north to south, all the way. And what they said was everybody has a central point of access, which is if you are experiencing homelessness or at risk, you're to call 211. That is the first step of getting you into a statewide database, which is called HMIS, Homeless Management Information System. From there, you are directed to the appropriate CAN for your location. And the CAN is made up of providers, not just shelter providers, but also outreach workers, any agency that has anything that touches the homeless in any way, in any shape or form. So it might be a housing provider. It could be mental health workers. It could be substance abuse workers. It could be anybody. We work with many different kinds of agencies, community action agencies, and that kind of thing. And so we have a weekly meeting where we have a list of people who are experiencing homelessness in our region, who are active and working with people, and or in shelter or and out of shelter, doesn't matter. And we have rules for prioritization that are handed to us by DOH. So our main priority for selecting somebody for a housing opportunity. So at this meeting, it's also called a matching meeting. Our meeting happens to be called the Unicorns. There's a whole story there. And I lead our meeting. Our meeting is for Northeast individuals. There's a separate Eastern CAN family meetings. And then there's a Southeast individuals meeting, just because people tend to want to be north or south and not want to move so freely. So in the matching meeting, housing providers come together with people who are shelter providers or outreach workers, and we all come together, and it's interesting. The housing providers will say, I have 2 opportunities open for rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing or something like that. So permanent supportive housing is long-term housing with case management that comes with it. Rapid rehousing is a much shorter term model where you pay somebody you'll get case management for a year, but they will help you find an apartment. They will fund the first the security, first month rent, and some portion of it becomes a step down program, so that usually by month 6 you are paying your own rent. But you still have case management who can help you navigate the rest of your lease. So we have prioritization, which means we select for housing opportunities based on length of time homeless. That is the number 1 criteria. Because of COVID, we then also now select people over the age of 60. They can be selected, prioritized, because obviously somebody who's older is at higher risk. So right now, and it all depends on the funding. Right now, there's no rapid rehousing money. There's none. There just is none. We had a housing meeting yesterday in which no one was matched because there were no opportunities. So it was just an update where we case conference and that kind of thing. So that's the process. Case management obviously sees people into housing and also supports them along the way. And it helps them to stay in their housing. In terms of, I mean, my shelter is, as I said, adults only. I can tell you the number one and number two are very close together. Reason that we get turned away is prior evictions and criminal history. So most of my folks have those things. I wish there was a rule. If I could wave a magic wand and make some fairness laws happen on the books, one of them would be that you don't look back at prior evictions beyond 3 years or 5 years. Everybody goes through a period of time in their life where life gets very challenging for one reason or another. We've had people who had evictions that were more than 10 years old, and yet they've shown up and prevented them from getting housed. And same with convictions. I always thought that we had a penal system that we believed in and said, okay, you go to jail, you've done your time. I have learned to uncheck the box, but even that isn't really real. And yet, again, criminal history. I've had people get turned away for misdemeanor breach of peace 5 years ago, you know. So that's incredibly challenging and difficult, and especially when we are up against students who presumably have no evictions and no criminal history because they're 18.
And more money.
And more money, and parents who will sign a lease. So, yeah, so that makes it, that's our biggest challenge right now. So, yeah.
Can you house people in Mansfield? Do you ever find any spots in Mansfield?
We have, but it's pretty rare. The biggest issue for Mansfield for us is transportation. And I've actually been trying to take on the transportation in the state is horrible, is just horrible. And I could just go on and on about the difficulties that we face trying to get people where they need to go, because so the shelter is about a half a mile from the Mansfield line, but that's also the county line. So if I have somebody who commits a crime in Mansfield, they have to go to Rockville. Do you know how hard it is to get to Rockville from Willimantic? It can't be done, not on public transportation, not in time to have your case heard. That means I have to give up a worker to drive that person and spend the day in Rockville.
Uber or some Lyft or something.
I Uber from Willimantic to Danielson, which is 13 miles, $50. Forget it. It's like, I can't even, and I don't have funding for that. So that's, the transportation is the biggest challenge. I think though that, you know, WRTD does come up, like if it was close enough to a bus route, I would absolutely house somebody in Mansfield if I could find that, you know, but again, it's affordability. So when we have people who have subsidies, and I'll tell you right now in my shelter, 30 people roughly in my shelter, I made a list to find out how many of them have subsidies who are in shelter right now. And
Section 8?
Well, yes, or something similar. So they are holding a voucher.
A rent voucher.
17 of my people right now have the ability to move into an apartment tomorrow and have a lifetime subsidy that will pay their rent for the rest of their lives. And I can't find apartments for them. And I think I have 4 or 5 people right now who have already been in housing with their subsidies and have left the housing, still have their subsidies. But in one case, the apartment, the unit changed hands. The new landlord raised the rent above the FMR, the fair market rate. And so that person couldn't renew the lease at that place and has been homeless for a year since leaving that apartment. Another one was somebody, a client that we housed, with a subsidy, and his apartment was very substandard. And it became more substandard over time, to the point where he felt that he couldn't be safe there, and he left and went to live in a tent. He still is in a tent 6 months later, and can't find an apartment.
How do the subsidies line up with the market rents in various parts of the state?
So they pay fair market rate. So, so every town has a different fair market rate.
Well, that's my
So,
question, is
yeah.
what towns? Mansfield sounds like probably one where the actual rents that landlords are charging are higher than the subsidies. Is that correct?
That's one of the things landlords do. Is if they decide whether or not, you can't legally, so homelessness is a protected class. So you can't legally discriminate against somebody because of their homeless situation. But landlords, the FMR is right on, you can just go online and find out what it is and charge $100 more. And that means you don't have to take a subsidy. So you are discriminating without saying it out loud, right? You're gonna advertise your unit above the FMR, nobody's even gonna challenge it. On the way here, I saw a 4-bedroom house for rent. I was really excited. Students.
Yeah.
It said right on it, student
Yeah.
housing.
Very nice.
When they say students only, that is discrimination, and we will call them and tell them that you are discriminating.
But are they saying, because that would be, are they saying only, like students only?
Not that sign that I saw just said
It's usually-
student rental, which is not the same as, it's not discriminatory.
Right, because it's, yeah, it's a hard thing.
We've seen on Marketplace where somebody says students only must show ID. We've called and said you can't do that.
So if we, so we have a housing trust fund, and we may start getting, finally get to a point like where we're going to get applications and we have priorities, and one of those priorities relate to people who are homeless, without shelter. What's the right?
Unhoused.
Unhoused, yes, unhoused. Thank you. So, one thing I know, I've heard maybe you talk about or others that would be helpful is if in housing, let's say run by a nonprofit or housing authority, they had set aside units that gave priority to people who are unhoused.
We have projects in town in Willimantic, and there are other projects that have homeless set asides. And so what they do is they work with an agency. So in the case of Brick Row, I don't know if you're familiar with Brick Row, it's right behind Cumberland Farms on Main Street. So that is run by, it's managed by a management company that's hired out by United Services. So United Services has homeless set-asides there, and they have on-site case management. And that is a wonderful thing. Project-based housing is, also Cedar Woods has homeless set-asides, and we've placed several people there. That's a nice thing. So project-based housing is project-based. If you go there as a homeless, somebody who is experiencing homelessness, and you enter into a homeless set-aside apartment, it means that is where you will live. If you decide to leave there, you have to leave on your own steam. Like you will not be eligible for a homeless subsidy to go somewhere else. That's the one drawback that makes people hesitate to go into those units.
When, just to use a specific example, when the Standard giant project up in Four Corners is completed, there are going to be affordable units that they were required to dedicate to 80% AMI people. Would the vouchers that, whatever kind they are, Section 8 or whatever, would those vouchers match the affordable rents that the Standard, for instance, is going to be charging?
Yes, as long as they're like within the FMR, yes, absolutely. And in fact, we
So-
have,
So to continue, just one more second, we have
Sure.
a number of projects that are coming along
right,
with multiple units that are
Mhm.
going, those would all be useful to you.
absolutely. And I'll tell you, Gan Eden, and you probably are familiar with
Yeah.
Gan Eden and Willimantic, that we love them, because they have, they are, income-based, units. And they're now, of course, they are for elderly and disabled, so not everybody that we have can go in there. But we are seeing a huge increase in, people over 60 who are experiencing homelessness. And I tell everyone that works with me, when that person comes through our door, the first thing you do is fill out a Gan Eden application, because there's a waiting list, but they have so many units, there's a little bit of a higher turnover, and they will work with our people. We have had more trouble with Foster Drive. They seem to, so one of the things that I've actually reached out to the CHRO about, the Commission on Human Rights, is, the fact that if we have somebody who has a full subsidy, why is it that when they fill out an application for a place like Foster Drive, if they have a poor credit score or their income is not, 3 times the, rent, they would get turned down if they have a full subsidy. That doesn't make sense, you know, and yeah, but that is a way to discriminate.
So can I just ask a little bit about this 80%? So if it's there, the subsidy would cover, we have a unit and they're gonna be charged, it's restricted to people earning 80% or lower of the area median income. A lot of times they're saying that people won't qualify because they won't make enough money
Right.
to live there. So how would the Section 8 voucher
Right.
work there?
So sometimes they don't. It has to do with we have a few other projects, not in our area, but Waterford has one and things like that, where you have to have income that is in this window, right? And it's a lower income than the AMI, but it's, and then you have to pay, they will subsidize some amount of your rent. So those are really good for people who, for instance, are on disability and they have income, but not enough income to pay for a full-on apartment. So that's how I think those work, but I don't know enough about them. Like the tax credit properties and things like that. Cedar Woods is one.
But these are totally private. The developers, in order to, they're basically building apartments for students. But our regulations, town regulations say you've got to make 15% of them for people at 80% of the median income or less.
Right.
So they're gonna be renting, what are they gonna be renting, around $1,200?
Well, it's 80% of the
Wait.
fair market rent.
So it's less.
Of
than
the fair market rent?
So they have to look at the fair market rent.
Okay,
Okay, so they can't. I'd have, it's complicated. I just,
You know, there's
Anyway.
a formula.
there's a
Right.
formula. So
Which is-
basically, like say, 80% AMI
Mhm.
is $100,000, right? Let's
Right.
just say that. Then, they can't pay more than 30% of their income, all in, utilities, everything, for that rent. And that amount is calculated based on the fair market rent.
Okay.
so if these folks have a subsidy that, whether it's a rent voucher or Section 8, that, is geared to taking up the difference between what they can pay at 30% of their income and that fair market rent, as long as the rent they're charging isn't over that fair market rent, then they
Right.
should qualify.
Yes, yes.
Unless these folks, I never thought about this, right? Unless these places like the Standard or other developments raise other issues, like you have to be a certain income level.
Right.
Mhm.
And it shouldn't matter if the person has a subsidy.
Mhm.
If they have a guaranteed subsidy to subsidize their rent, and their 30% of their income plus the subsidy pays the rent,
right.
then they're.
And so, yes, and so when we have people who have income, but
Think
still
about-
qualify for a subsidy, so they say they get a full boat TSH or Section 8, but they still have income. They have to pay, they always have to pay 30% of their income toward their
Right,
rent. So the subsidy just pays the difference.
right. So in that case, they could go in and take a market rate. But it's gonna be more than fair market.
Right. Then they.
Right, right.
Right,
Well, the subsidy, right, but the subsidy will look at it too, and they probably will not. I don't know if, there would probably be a negotiation on the subsidy, which sometimes they can do. Sometimes they can say, we can go 10% over the subsidy or something like that. I'm not sure that the, like DOH, if the, or DEMIS, if the subsidy is coming from one of those entities, that they would say, okay, to paying a higher than, even if what they're paying is fair market, right? If the rent is higher than fair market, they might say no to that. I'm not sure.
Maybe rather than take up a lot of time, maybe it's something we
Yeah.
can look into.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's something we hadn't thought
So
of.
I
The
think we
developers
have
are not gonna settle for, in these high-end places with all kinds of amenities and Wi-Fi and stuff. They're not gonna wanna just get fair market rent for those units.
Right.
But they are if they're 15.
But
they have
50% of
to.
them, that's the reason I brought it up.
Right.
15% of them are basically
Right.
held down by the code.
Yes, which is great.
But we should look into tightening regulations and zoning related to their rental standards. Just as we did about student.
Yeah.
you can't
You can't?
dictate rent. I
Right,
mean,
so
right,
that's-
that would be, yeah.
Well, can't we say, well, it's against the fair housing law to turn away someone that has a subsidy? So they can't say, we're not gonna rent because you've got a Section 8
Well,
subsidy.
they can't anyway.
They won't say that.
No,
they'll
that's
say,
a private
yeah.
eviction.
They'll
Right.
say you have a prior eviction, they'll say your credit score is not high enough, that your income is not adequate. They can set any criteria for renting.
Yeah.
And then live by that standard, knowing that they are discriminating, but not ever, you can't ever prove it. So, I mean, I've always dreamed of this to be able to say in my town, if you are a landlord that make an ordinance, say, for instance, that said, if you are a landlord that has a certain number of units, I'm talking about landlords who have more than 15 or 20 units in one municipality, one single municipality. So if you have this many units, you must accept a subsidy for 10% of your units. You must prove, it could be anything. I don't care what the subsidy, it could be rapid rehousing. It could be just somebody who has a subsidy for a short time. I don't care. But to me, that is something that would encourage all kinds of fairness around housing.
That would have to come from the state.
I know, and the
That would
state, I don't
need a
think the state
neighboring
will do it.
legislation
Yeah.
to touch that, yeah.
But that would be,
I mean, similarly, the state could say you can't limit the look back on eviction or limit the look back on
That's
right.
criminal history, but that would also have to come from the state, right? We have
Right.
no control over that kind of thing.
Well, right, and I know you can't, it's funny that there's no way to, like the thought of regulating landlord-tenant relations is, very hands-off. Nobody wants to do that. But at the same time, there is not a single mechanism for landlord oversight. And I see it all day long, but I'm helpless to it. And I write to CHRO and they're very, very busy. So, yeah.
So I'm wondering, I mean, this has really been a good discussion. I think it's point out what Sheila said,
Yeah,
we have not sat down and said, specific strategies for people that are unhoused, right?
Right.
And I think that's actually what we would need to do.
So, and I think, when I'm
And
listening
I wouldn't
to-
even want to do it in a meeting, just have a workshop.
Right,
Mm.
and I'm thinking that there's a lot of this stuff that has to happen at the state level.
Mhm.
Like the town can only
Sure.
do so much. we need so like
Yeah.
a list of enabling legislation.
Is there
that we
any
go
low
to.
hanging fruit?
Well, let's
No.
find out.
Yeah,
Well,
I
that's-
mean, what other towns are doing, right? But it would be great to have an ordinance like that because we have so many landlords in town. I mean, Mansfield, for a town its size, has more multifamily development than most other towns. I mean, we're not a city, right? We're,
Right,
yeah,
right.
so, but
Yeah,
But it's because the market is providing a bunch of students who have a lot of money,
mhm,
whose parents have a lot of money and who are willing to spend it on housing.
Yeah.
And just drives the rents up.
right,
And you sort of can't blame a landlord for wanting to get more
right,
money for their
Right.
property.
yeah, yeah, I agree,
Avery, can I ask a question?
yeah.
How many, in your period of time at No Freeze, how many folks come from Mansfield that find themselves unhoused?
So that's usually a pretty small number, and here's why. A lot of times when people end up with us, they have come to Willimantic already because of some circumstance. Maybe they needed to go into recovery, and so they went to recovery housing, and then they failed out of that. And so when I ask, what was your last address? It's usually a Willimantic address. But then we find out down the road, oh yeah, I grew up in whatever, Bristol. Like, we have people, a lot of transplants, but it's not obvious to us because usually if they've come to Willimantic, they didn't come to Willimantic to become homeless. They came to Willimantic, or because they were homeless, they came to Willimantic because of some other kind of opportunity that didn't work out. So, yeah, we don't have a lot of people that come from Mansfield. But I can't give you an exact number there.
Have you had any experience with this? I guess it's kind of a new twist. There's a place down in New Haven called Rosette Village. Have you heard of this? It's a group of little buildings.
Oh, yeah.
little-
Tiny
Tiny
houses.
houses. Do you have any experience with that or any?
I've had a
Thought
lot
about
of,
that?
thought about it. I'm not excited about them. And the reason, I think they're great in some places, very big urban areas. I think it's wonderful in some ways. My concern is this, because I try to advocate as much as I can for my folks. When you create tiny houses, you're usually putting them all in one plot of land. So you're just still isolating them from the rest of the
Yeah.
community. And a lot of those tiny home projects don't have like bathrooms or
communal
kitchen facilities.
bathrooms, right.
It's just really a box that you can sleep in and there might be
Like
heat.
one step up from a tent, I guess.
Yeah, and so I'd much rather have people come into shelter where they have, yes, they still have communal bathrooms and they still have that kind of thing, and heat and things like that. But on the other hand, they also have people right there who are saying, let's talk about your housing plan. Let's get you into something stable and let's get you connected to the services that will help you stay in a stable home. So tiny houses are really great if there isn't a good shelter around, and I don't mind them. And if somebody said we're gonna do one, I would probably participate in it, but I don't see that as stable housing, and I don't see that as a goal. It's just a different way to get there, so, yeah.
So, in the interest of time, I think we gotta move on, but I think, thank you, Avery.
Thank you.
Thank you for not just coming but also for your incredible work you're doing.
Thank
Um,
you, thank you.
Like I said before, I think if the committee wants to dive into this, we need to sit down and focus and talk specifically and see, come up with some specific directions, I think. 'Cause that is not something we have done. Good, thank you.
Good, Susan, if she has any last words.
Yeah.
Looks like you have something you wanted to share.
Oh, gosh, yeah, so my name is Susan Hunter. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyndham Area Interfaith Ministry. So we are celebrating our 40th anniversary this year.
That's
and
amazing.
It is, and it's most of what the funding we have is privately fundraised. So we get a little bit of funding for rental assistance through United Way. and we work with Operation Fuel, but like Walk for Warmth, all that funding goes toward rental assistance or energy assistance. So we, while we do, so we're Avery and I intersect with our organizations as people coming out of homelessness will come to us and they'll get their furniture for their apartments. We also work with the domestic violence shelters. But our whole focus is what we call the ALICE population, and I don't know if you're familiar with the term. And so those are folks that are below the federal poverty level, but also people who are working, but they just can't afford the basics in their community. And so we try to tackle homelessness in a different way. So we see people coming in that are on the verge of eviction for whatever reason. They don't have sick time at work, they're working 2 or 3 jobs. And they're out sick, or they have some kind of other thing that happens because they are living paycheck to paycheck. Or they're deciding, do I pay my utility bill or my rent? Do I make my car repair or my rent or food? Like, those are the decisions that the folks that we serve have to face. And so what we try to do is not only help with rental assistance, or sometimes we'll say, you know, we'll help you with your car, and that will free up for your rent. So we try to be very creative, and we have the ability to do that because our funding is privately fundraised or through small local foundations. So what we see is obviously, like in Windham, it's a critical mass where we have private investors coming in and snapping up property, and the fair market, the rents are just increasing and people just can't afford them. We always try to look at the root cause, because we just don't want to help somebody one time and then have them continue to come back. We try to look at the root cause of generational poverty, of why people continue to find themselves in situations. And so one of the things that we are looking at, that we've talked to some people in the room about, is this Jumpstart Housing, affordable housing program. And so this was born probably a year and a half ago. One of our delegates is extremely interested in it. And we have a private donor that's willing to has been giving us seed money to kind of get this off the ground. So our whole thought, it's not just because we see people who are, some of them do have affordable housing and some of them do have vouchers, and they're coming to us for assistance. So how does that happen? Like, how can we keep people in affordable housing to stay in affordable housing? Because it's not just about providing that. So what we're looking at is having, and we're talking about developing it ourselves, although we're quickly realizing we are not developers. But the overarching vision is to have property, and Mansfield is very welcoming and interested, and we really appreciate your support and interest to have. We initially started thinking 4 units, but the more we talk to people, it looks like something more than that would probably be better. And not just provide below market rate rent, but it's also to provide services around it and a rebate program. And so what we're proposing, it's not case management, because the people that we see come in, the majority of folks that are struggling, it's really like they're in reaction mode. And that's how they live their lives. That's how they've grown up, and they don't know how to get out of it, and they want to get out of it. They don't want to have to constantly be trying to just cobble together resources just to survive. So we have a PIP, Partners and Independence mentorship program that we currently run. We've been running it for ages, where we will talk to people who we recognize, like, they just need support in meeting goals. They need support in how do they get the life skills to make different decisions. And it's been extremely successful. We've had the mentorship partnership, some of them, the longest one has been 8 years, where the person bought their first home. And it took 8 years to get there, but they did. And so our thought is to take the PIP program and overlay it into the housing. So it wouldn't just be affordable, it would be less than affordable, like lower than affordable. And the people would have to connect in with a PIP mentor first and foremost. And while home ownership could be the goal really is, for people to connect with a so it's not case management. We're talking mentorship, coaching, working with a person so that they can build their skills to be independent and to make better decisions and really be empowered in their lives. And there would be components, and it all will depend on where the person is that comes in. But there could be a financial literacy piece. If people are interested in home ownership, what does that look like? Because owning a home isn't just owning a home. I remember when I bought my first home and the water pump went and I wanted to call, like, who do I call? I don't have a landlord to call. So there's those things that you need to consider. And for the folks that they're not sure, or tenancy feels better to them, it is a lot of work around what does it mean to be a good tenant? How do you advocate for yourself? What are your rights as a tenant? And then building other life skill programs around it, depending on the needs of the person. So if it is a single parent, maybe it's how to help them navigate childcare, or maybe it's someone that's barely making it. Maybe their mentor can help them to get a better job or a different career, and we would, connect them with the job center. We have a lot of community partners that we work closely with in that respect. The other part of the program is there would be a rebate. So depending on the level that they participate, there would be a rebate they would get back at the end of like the first year, second year, potentially 3 years. This would span depending on where people are. And I love how things just like start to gel together. We were talking to Liberty Bank, and they have this IDA program. It's a savings account where they'll match the savings that people put in to their accounts. And so they're very interested in potentially working with us. So that way, the goal is if this person wants home ownership, they'll have a little bit of a nest egg when they leave the program for a down payment. Or if
What would the rebate be of?
the rebate would be of partially, would be the match, and it would be the rebate from part of their rent. So we would hold it aside, right?
Susan, do you have this out? Do you have I don't know if there's anything you can share publicly or share with us, an outline of this? Because
It's handwritten, like, I have to make it pretty, because we're like, as we're talking about it, and we have partners coming. in, we
extremely
keep-
interesting.
Yeah, it is. And on the tenancy side, if they choose to stay a tenant, which is perfectly okay, they'll have a nest egg built. And so that way they'll have a cushion. So if things in life happen, they're not coming back to us for help.
So they can stay in the units that you are looking to develop,
They
or
could,
is it transitional?
they could, but the hope would be that they would be able to have the flexibility to move where they want to move. If they don't want to stay there, that there are other places that they can move. We were talking, the Habitat for Humanity.
I was gonna say, this
We-
seems like Habitat would be a great partner for this. kind of-
Exactly, yeah, because they do the housing piece and they have all that, so that would be a very natural handoff. So yeah, so that's the idea for our program, and again, we initially talked about development, but like the more we talk to people, we're just like, I don't know what the development part. Although I had just gotten seated on the board of the NCCDC, Northeast Connecticut
yeah.
Community Development Corporation, so they just developed the Marie Building.
Where is the Marie?
Oh, it's in Willimantic, so it's
Oh.
across, right next to Liberty Bank.
Oh,
on Main
okay,
Street.
yeah, all right, yeah.
And it's beautiful the way they kept the historic nature of the building. And so they may be interested in partnering with us to do some development. We have a lot of people that are interested in working with us, so we're still fleshing it out, but to us, it's not just about providing affordable housing. It's like, how do we provide people the tools that they need to not feel like they're in response mode and they can just feel like they're in control of their lives.
But our committee would be a funding source, basically.
Yeah.
That's what you're seeing here.
We've been talking and I think it feels like if this would be the perfect use of our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, if we could kind of help leverage them with a program, once their program gets fleshed out, if they find land, or a partnership even with the housing authority.
Yes,
Because it sounds like you have a private dump,
yes.
potentially Habitat.
Yep.
It's a,
Yeah, we've worked with, we've been talking with
Yeah.
Habitat, so we've been having some
Interesting.
just
so you get a
conversations.
unit and you get services, you get guidance
Mhm.
as part of your housing package. You get a lesson in how to be a homeowner or a tenant.
Mhm.
Wonder if there's a,
From stuff you never had,
a foundation.
information you never
Yeah,
had.
see this as,
Yeah.
are there any foundations, like, I'm thinking of,
Awesome.
oh, it's, no, it's one of the biggest housing trusts.
Melville.
Melville, looking at it's almost the kind of, well, it's the kind of thing they used to just go salivate about.
Mhm.
A community model that encompasses people with needs, but moves them to independence.
Mhm.
And once this gets more fleshed out, the Melville Trust might really, I used to know everybody there, but I don't know.
Are
anybody
you
there
looking
now.
at the state's DEP program?
Yes, so that's, I
So
need,
that's just opening, right?
that's just opening now. I need to submit a request to have an initial conversation before I
Right.
start submitting applications. But there's also the federal discretionary funding pot, which opens. So I'm actually meeting with Aaron McBride from Senator Murphy's office next week to kind of talk through that more.
So if you need anything from this committee to
Mhm.
go forward with the DEP, let us know.
Excellent, thank you so much.
So I'm not sure. I guess it has to be approved by all of us, but that's fine. We'll do it.
I mean, I'm just thinking letters of support.
Right,
from
right.
Well, the council would need to kind of
Right.
authorize you
So we
to,
would,
but so as you move forward,
Right.
we need to go to our council, you know,
Yeah.
and see if,
but I think that the DEP has this informal interview,
Yes,
which is non-committal.
yeah.
yes.
So I think at that point, we could write a non-committal letter that
Okay.
doesn't,
Yes.
you know, that says we're on board with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to say that
We're
we have
supportive.
we have a housing trust fund and these are our priorities.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
can phrase that
yeah, and,
if time's short.
yeah.
And
So
we
what
can express
figure out-
opinion
I
as
can
to the
talk
quality
the
of your
manager
program
and
too.
he would,
Right, right. So I mean,
Yeah.
that we could do quickly, and then as, if you get the green light, then we can go through the town council and do everything here.
Great.
Listen, right?
Thank you. It's exciting but intimidating.
these.
And everything takes forever.
I've not really talked with Avery, but the energy that your group has for this is really, it's really fun. Like
Thank
it's
you.
a fun project
Yeah,
to, you know, hear about. I've enjoyed like our conversation with Merle and you and other folks, so.
thank you very much. Yeah. It is exciting
Okay.
because I think it's unique. So
Very
What is the
challenging.
Margaret Mead? What did she say? A few dedicated people can change the world. NCCDC was a good example of that. A group of women, legal women, voter women in the early 70s got together.
Yeah.
And no money, they founded this nonprofit. I was involved. And we got this upfront grant from Farmers Home and got a guy who was looking to rehabilitate himself from something that had happened, and he ran it and it just took off. I mean, they've had their ups and downs through the years, but it's just, and they built hundreds of homes. There's some homes they built on Maple Road.
Mine was one of them.
Oh, was it? Okay,
That's in it,
yes.
yeah.
And they're very pretty, they're pretty homes on Maple Road and,
See if there'll be a quote for sure.
yeah.
Good. So
Yeah,
any other
awesome.
discussion, or we can let you
Yeah.
get back to your home and dinner?
thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for joining us, and like I said, thank you for your incredible work. I know it's not easy work.
Oh, my goodness.
It's easy when you have a passion.
So we do have a connection, right? Debbie, you're on the Wayne board? Gina, are you on No Freeze?
No freeze board, yeah.
So that can be informal communication.
Yes, of course.
So keep us posted and expect you guys to report back to us if you hear anything before other things start happening.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, good night. Thank you.
Good night.
See you at the next meeting. Exactly.
Monday.
Monday.
Good meeting.
I've just been in like 3 meetings with Avery, that's why it's like, but all virtual.
Okay, I want to be, sensitive to people's time, so I'm going to talk about a couple of things quickly and then probably punt other things down to our next meeting. So that was excellent discussion, I think, a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of work to do. There's a letter to PZC from M. Ross, which, thank you, Paul, he brought that to my attention, I missed that. About a unique development they're planning.
They're,
It was like,
Or
they would like.
to-
Oh,
like-
okay. I was so confused
would
by
like
this, I was
to.
kind of like.
They'd like to, that's,
like
yeah,
It's a concept.
yeah.
It's a
And
concept,
it
right?
it raised an
Thank you.
interesting question for me, in my mind. A little space between my ears. If someone came in and developed, like a little mini neighborhood of single family homes or 2 families or something. Does our zoning code have any provision for getting our 15% set aside out of that kind of an operation?
They're doing five units or more, they have to do. it.
Yeah.
5 units or more?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
So out of 5, you'd have to do
At least one,
1.
yeah.
Yep,
Okay, I was just concerned that, someone could come in and do something that the code doesn't contemplate.
no, so a subdivision, you do a subdivision, you have to give, that's where, in some ways, the fee in lieu may work, right?
right.
Not the current one.
Well, but, right, but it would be.
$20.
Yeah, so, yeah, so this is, they are looking, currently what they wanna do. There's no zoning that allows. for
Right.
that.
It's like middle housing,
It's what?
like middle housing.
It's like
Yeah.
housing, yeah, so,
Oh, I'm sorry.
so that's why they came to PZC and said, look, this is what we wanna do. Like, you're updating your zoning regulations, can you help us, please?
So like, when I read this, it felt to me kind of like Freedom Green.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Freedom Green, so but what I'm hearing you say is that there isn't anything in the zoning code that allows for it? Because the land across from Freedom Green, right? They have a plan, like if you buy it, like when you look at the specs, it says how it could be developed.
But it's not approved.
Oh, it's not approved.
No.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what they're saying
Yeah,
is
for
like.
marketing. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that's why when I read this, I was like, yeah, this makes sense, like
It's
there's
like
already land.
What kind of zone is Freedom Green?
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
have
it's the DMR zone. That is the design multiple residence zone.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of, it's a floating zone where you, if you're on Arterial Road, you can, that would be how you could do,
But
a
so the land
Freedom Green.
across the street is not DMR?
they could apply to become DMR.
That's the
But
floating one.
But
Yeah.
so when you have a person that is like that.
But right
comes
now,
with
we have a
concept.
moratorium, if you remember, on
Yes.
family development.
I got you.
And DMR is very, very imperfect. So it's almost like you can't. You can't develop the way you need to develop today using the DMR. And that's why we haven't really had anyone apply it. The last development that applied it was the apartments on North Frontage Road. That's DMR.
Hmm. This looks almost like co-housing too.
Yeah, it could
Yeah.
look like, I
Yeah.
was like,
Totally
I was
like
thinking
co-housing.
co-housing,
Yeah,
yeah.
because they are a community of people.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That
That's
are,
what they want to
they
build.
want to build a community
Very
for,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. I would
So I
think
don't
it's
see
very
any
cool.
action on this, but except to keep our eye out and see if anything comes of
But so
it.
would this be something that we would welcome them to come so we can talk to them about?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I
like,
think it's,
Be like, hey, we'd love to talk to you about affordable housing. in our
Well, they know that whatever they do has to have affordable housing. I mean, they've been told that
Yeah.
15%.
Yeah.
Oh, I gotcha.
So our normal review process would kick
come.
in at some point.
Yeah.
so I think the action is just to keep our eye out and see
Yeah.
if this is going forward. And I think at some point, if it's going forward, it would be appropriate to talk to them about.
Well, the
housing. I
PCC
mean,
has
they
to-
might,
Would have brought that up too, yeah.
Figure something out.
right. Good. Okay, 4E is just the state's DEP is moving forward, so. It says here on April 8th, something's gonna happen. I think they're activating the spring thing, but we know. So the housing authority said they were pursuing it. They're coming at our next meeting, so you can touch base with them again. And Susan said that they were considering it also, so that's good. And I think if people are applying and lend our support in an appropriate and official way.
Cheer them on.
And I think that will be very valuable. Then we don't have to write the thing, which is really good.
Mhm.
No, I'm just kidding. So that's good. That's great. It is almost 6:30. Old business, we have the tax abatement ordinance, which was something I think would be very beneficial to us, but I don't know that we're gonna cover it tonight. Last meeting, we essentially prepared 3 documents that are necessary to move it forward.
You guys are almost there. There's just a few decision points. that you- And I think one of them is,
Number of years.
well, the number of years, I think that people would probably agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what I.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then,
Well, there's this, whether it's open to private developers.
that's the issue is, whether or not it's open to private developers. And when I talked to our director of finance, she said if a private developer wants to do affordable housing, not as part of a.
Right,
set
not as
aside,
part of the 15%.
you know, they're, it's part of their, what we call entitlements. But they want to come in if they're,
Do
you know,
more.
and do more, or they want to do more, or they want to do, you know.
The whole project being,
Well, there's a private developer in the state that's doing that under 830G, and they've gone to a number of communities,
Protect.
and they've been welcomed in some, like in New London, you know the name of them? And they've gone to Avon, Simsbury, and they're doing much more than 10 or 15%.
Right.
Right.
And it's
If
not
they
just at 80%, it's
If
even
they do
below.
over, if they do
Right.
30% or over, the town.
That's what it is,
Pretty much
yes.
out of the picture. Unless they want to come forward and say, give us a tax abatement for.
Well, they're in court. If they'd have to, so under that was one of my questions under this ordinance. What percentage of units are we talking about?
So every project would be renegotiated in a separate contract.
I would be in favor
So
of,
that puts a separate control on a specific project. It says, you know, we're gonna do 50-50 affordable, you know, market rate or something, and then a contract is set up specifically for that project with
Yeah.
that developer.
So for
So this
example,
ordinance is general. It doesn't.
Okay,
I would be in
provide
favor
any-
of the ordinance allowing for a tax abatement for any in a multifamily setting, any units above and beyond the minimum 15% set aside, because
but if you come in with an 830G and you're just doing 30% and you don't have to go through any local zoning, do you still want to give them a tax payment?
Well, that's a good question.
that's a good question, yeah.
what are the odds of an 830G application hitting Mansfield?
oh, pretty good.
The minute she says it will be done.
I mean, doesn't it require infrastructure, for instance?
Yeah,
Yeah, but we have infrastructure in the
Big
southern part of
engineering
town.
systems and so on,
And
yeah.
once the
Okay.
moratorium
Well,
is
that's a good
listed, that's
question.
it.
so is it like if they did, say 40 or 50%, since 830G, it's 15% at 80% AMI and 15% at 60% AMI.
Right.
So it would have to, we want, to me, after listening to this committee, I think what you would want is some sort of language is if they did, you know, 40% and some at below 50%.
That's what I was thinking too.
But
So,
that's all worked out in
That's
this
all on
contract.
negotiation.
so
Right.
incentive though
Right.
to
And that's
lower
what
the
priority-
So we're
incomes
not
or
gonna
do
give them a
something.
tax abatement unless they.
Well, here,
develop a
this may be
project
covered in
along
this
these
priorities section. Should align with it, Mansfield's affordable housing priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we have
I
to
think
strengthen
that-
those priorities, we should do that.
So that's in our letter, right?
Yeah, this is.
Right. And I think if you look at, the town manager letter, it gives a lot of examples of people using tax abatements currently across Connecticut and doing really remarkable things. I mean, impressive what people are doing.
If they're doing an 830G project, and they're giving 30% up for affordable various income levels, what are they getting, what are they gaining? What are they getting out of that? Because it seems like a big commitment to
Well, they
make.
don't have to meet all the planning and zoning requirements.
So
of
that
the
then they can make
developers.
a building that basically
They get
violates our
huge
planning.
They could get huge density, they
I
can
see.
get huge height, they can get
Less
reductions on
parking,
parking, you can
right.
get,
Right.
no design standards.
Okay, so this is the reason why we try to get to the 10%
Mhm.
and why we haven't made any progress in getting towards it.
So tax abatement's gonna be awarded to both nonprofit and for-profit projects. Multifamily, I think you want a line in there, maybe like, that if they
So-
put in under 830G, that it's over the 30%.
I have a question. How are we gonna finalize these? Is that gonna be you or is that gonna be us?
So you could make them, like, you could give a broad brush, and say that you are generally in favor of this and that,
We did that once before.
yeah, and then
We said
you're giving
You could
the
tweak it.
chair. I would love for your help, though. The chair
Sure.
could work with staff to make the
Sure.
changes. And remember, this is going to the town council's ordinance
Well,
review.
Before it goes there, I'd like to
Well,
see it.
we
You have it.
prepared.
That's
these
the whole thing.
for
Yeah.
Jennifer, now they just have a couple tweaks. And I don't
Mike did,
know,
Mike, of course, but you and Paul really did the most
Right.
of this, yeah.
but there's still some stuff in here that's,
Would it,
so the question, what's the next step? If the committee. If the committee has no issues with these documents, then we can go to that phase, which is. I work with the staff to finalize them, and then something happens, we move them forward in the town.
Otherwise, we would need a commitment from the committee to just really look at this by the May meeting, so that we can.
Yeah.
Keep moving.
I won't be
So
there.
May's gonna be
I'm here,
busy
but I-
too, because
I'm
we
okay
have
with
the housing
that.
authority coming back and we have Habitat coming in.
I'm okay with, just making the broad brush approach.
Why,
But
there
I
a
think we need to
motion from that
settle the
level?
830G issue, though. I think maybe if you come in under 830G, you're out of the ballgame. Now that I think about it, you're already taking advantage of the town in terms of, overriding its design standards and all the other stuff. Can we do that?
I don't think you want to, because some 830G projects are not bad. Sometimes it's like with the Eagleville Green, that was an 830G, right? Because they needed something, our zoning regulations didn't work. So we said, you should just come under 830G. And so I don't think you want, I think you want the ability to negotiate that, but that came in under 830G, but it's the majority of it's all gonna be under 60 AMI.
Right, and they're not
And
blowing
it's
off.
34. No, they definitely were, it was, we did not have the level of control that we did with the standard and all of that. Like in terms of that's things like landscaping. I mean, it will be well landscaped, but it might not be to the exact, and maybe our regulations aren't the best anyways, right? So I mean, we got a good developer there. And I don't think we want to discourage that, because maybe Helinka would come in under 830.
So how do we finesse the 830G issue?
I think you say that you want them to have more than just the 30% at 80, split by 80-60, so you'd want them to give you something else.
That's what I'm saying. We want
And you
more.
could also, under the priorities, Freddie should line with the Mass Affordable Housing Priorities as adopted 2023, in particular, those that target the lower income. categories.
But you guys, you want a lot of flexibility, because your priorities are gonna change. And you're like, you could go to the council next year and have different priorities, right? So,
Right.
and you don't wanna have to go change an ordinance every year, that's.
No. So the ordinance is simple. it doesn't get into detail on the contracts, work out all the details of
Yeah.
the.
I just would
development.
hate to see somebody coming and say, okay, I'm gonna do 25% of my units, at 80% of the median income. I have to do the 15, I want a tax abatement on 10%. I would hate to see us giving a tax abatement to someone who's doing, at 80% of median income. When they
So
have
I
all of the others at very high, rents and profits.
But, well, A30G is 15% at 60.
No, I'm talking about just a regular developer, like a standard coming in.
That's already called out, that it's.
I know, but not for the 15%, but what if they came in and said, we'll do another 10% of our
That-
units?
Why wouldn't we want to?
We're just saying no.
Discourage that, we
Just say
definitely
no.
wouldn't want to just,
Because at
Yeah.
80%, if they want to do it at 60%, that's fine, but
so it's gonna be a negotiation.
Right,
And you will have, hopefully part of that negotiation involves this committee, right? And
So how do you phrase that into?
the tax,
we could say something that the town establishes priorities for tax abatements.
and the tax, and,
And on a.
Does the word
annual
negotiate
basis.
get into there somewhere?
well,
It talks about contracts over and over and over again. I mean,
yeah, the council is the one that negotiates this contract, right? But, so they're giving up a lot, they're giving up a lot of tax revenue by doing this.
Yeah,
So they owe it to the public when they negotiate such a thing, and I think that they get something for that. So you have to give a little trust in that process, right? But,
But you could have a council that says, hey, we want to get to that 10%, and that's a really fast way to do it. People to give at least the minimum affordability, meet the minimum affordability standard. And that's
So we
fine,
could-
that helps some folks, but it sure doesn't help all those folks that they've talked about, or that help elderly on fixed,
So what I'm
And-
hearing is that we don't want to move this to a vote, that we would like to have more discussion on it, at our next meeting.
well, unfortunately, I'm gonna be away at the next meeting, but that's what I'm saying.
but you can provide,
yeah,
you
but
can provide an email, a comment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
do
that
that,
will.
yeah.
So,
So we should
So it's
review
just that
this.
piece,
so we
yeah.
need the language
but just
that we
that
can
piece.
look at and
Well, we
pray
have it.
over or whatever and
They have
then.
all.
Well, we
This
have it
is-
here.
Right.
well,
Yeah.
by the next meeting, we can update the language.
Yeah,
Yeah.
these two did a very
Mhm.
thorough job.
You guys are
Yeah,
great.
they did.
It just is looking at the details to make sure that everyone agrees
So,
with this before it goes. to the
Basically, try to get this to hearing the discussions and the issues. Trying to get this to a closer to final format for a possible vote at the next meeting without much discussion. You promise?
I won't be here, so you
Uh,
won't have to worry.
Well, as long as we have.
No. Well, we want to make sure you're happy with it.
It'll be the last meeting I missed for a long time, but I got
Well, something.
Short trip.
Okay, so it sounds like,
What are the other big issues?
well, no, it sounds like you and Paul worked on this, but Paul still has a question in
About
it
8:30.
about
Right.
8:30G, so,
830G question.
so everyone should
Priority.
review.
priorities, yes, who do we want?
So we
this to
gotta work
benefit?
that into.
Who do we
it.
want this to
Right.
benefit?
What were the other issues? Those were the only,
That's the only
That's the
big
big
one,
one.
right?
Yeah.
The number of years
Priorities.
is like not out.
No, that's.
I think the two of you should start a
That's
consulting firm.
good, so that's
So yeah, that
easy.
works.
But sounds like we're gonna wait till the next meeting to vote on it, and hopefully next meeting. We'll have a document that's ready to go.
Okay, perfect.
Excellent.
At some point when things are just like quieting down, if they ever do, I think your idea of having like a little workshop on your
Yeah,
specific strategies for the unhoused, for people who are unhoused,
right.
That would be good so that we understand that and we.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so many
It's
issues.
Figuring out how to add language.
This would be
Yeah.
helpful though.
Yeah, I really like,
Can we do them around
or her language.
fire pit with a glass of wine?
Sounds good to me.
Excellent. Do I hear any other motions tonight?
Motion adjourned.
Ah, you beat me to it.
You get seconds.
Seconded, good, seconded.
I second it.
We are adjourned. I apologize. 10 minutes late.
And I do apologize, I have to miss one more meeting.
Where are you going?
Just had this a group of us got a house at a charity auction for a long weekend in South Londonderry, and then it was all
Right.
flooded out, and not the house, but the area around it.
Was,
So we're finally able to go, and this is the
so.
time we could get, so.
Sure.
Good.